this is a great time to have on my good friend in Chicago, Sheriff David Clarke. Sheriff, I tell you what, you had a piece in Town Hall. I want you to talk about this a little bit. The carnage that is going on there. What is going on in Chicago, Sheriff?
It's amazing. First of all, hello to your listeners, but it's a lack of political leadership is where it starts. But this has been going on for years, and in that column I point out that just in 2 weekends, Memorial Day weekend and then the weekend before last, 91 people dead. 91 people shot, 15 dead in street violence. The gangs are in control in the city of Chicago. The police don't get the support, the political support that they should have. There is no plan by the superintendent. And this isn't just going on in Chicago, and I don't mean these type of numbers, but Baltimore is facing this thing they have for many years. Milwaukee's facing it. New York is seeing an uptick in crime. But this is just straight-up urban violence. I call it ghetto violence. Gang fights, turf wars. But again, if there's no plan to reduce and prevent this violence, the stuff will go on. But think of those numbers in the United States of America. Those sound like numbers that we would hear about after a firefight in Fallujah, for heaven's sakes.
What is the plan there? I mean, when you look at the number, the crime, and how you outlined it in your article. By the way, we put that up today. That'll be up today after this conversation on JF Report. You can read it there, or you can go to townhall.com. Sheriff, I mean, you're a sheriff. You're in law enforcement. I mean, how do you live in a city with this kind of chaos and crime going on? And I thought Chicago was like one of the number one cities in America where they banned guns.
Yeah, think about that for a minute. They have one of the strictest gun ownership laws anywhere in the United States. They were the last state, by the way, to go to concealed carry, but that's not really at issue here. But, I mean, that's how restrictive that they have been. And you'll find that in other cities in America. Look at Washington, D.C., right up the street from where you are. You see somewhat the same thing. These areas that are, the gun-free zones, so to speak, tend to have the most violence, which tell you something. But then again, if you have an inept political class like Chicago, that's what's going to happen. And the political support that the police have to have is extremely important, especially after this war on cops that we endured for 4 or 5 years when Barack Obama was the president of the United States, because he led the chorus on it, and he fanned the flames of this resentment against police. But these are areas that need the policing the most, that now the police have been handcuffed. You ask, what's the plan? They don't have a plan. Superintendent Eddie Johnson, he does not have a plan. He holds a news conference every time you have one of these bloody weekends, and it's more frequently now, especially that summer has set in. And all he does is talks about, well, this is unacceptable, and we're going to do everything we can. All these platitudes, but no real action. And I put in there because, as you mentioned, 40 years in law enforcement and urban policing in Milwaukee County and with the Milwaukee Police Department, you have to have a plan of action. You have to empower the police. I mean, for heaven's sakes, Congressman Bobby Rush, whose congressional district includes Cook County, several weeks ago said that the police were the sworn enemy of the people in Chicago. All right, so this is a kind of a lack of political support. And if you're a cop in Chicago, and you think about this, if you're a cop and you're going to put your life in danger, and you're going to put your life in the line, you're willing to do it if you know you're going to have political support. If you're not going to have some political support, a lot of these cops are figuring, it's not worth it. I'll go to the 911 call. I'll go to the calls for service, but I'm not going to do any of that, what they call discretionary policing, pulling that car over, jacking these thugs up there, standing on the corner. The superintendent had talked about open-air drug markets, and I'm thinking, if it's open air, why is there no police intervention? So it's not like they're doing this under the cover of inside a drug house where you have to get search warrants, and it's hard to get informants in there. It's happening right out on the street. But again, and I put the plan in there, okay? They need to go to stop, question, and frisk. They need to do warrant sweeps. They need to get the U.S. Attorney's Office involved and start charging some of these people under these career criminal statutes to lock them up for longer periods of time. You have Kim Fox, who's the district attorney or state prosecutor in Cook County. She's the one that dropped all the charges against Jussie Smollett. She's on a social justice crusade, so she doesn't have time to deal with the urban violence in Chicago. The people are being let down.
I want to get to a couple of things that you said in your article, if I may, which one of the things that you said is I spent a lot of time in Virginia Beach. That's where I live. I split my time between there and D.C. We had the horrific shooting a couple of weeks ago, as you know. It was horrible. Lots of calls for gun legislation and different things going on. But one of the things that you said in your piece is like what happened there goes on in Chicago almost on a weekly basis, and there's no attention paid to it, you said, whatsoever. It's like business as usual. And then you said that when you look at the cause, you said it was a culture of gang violence there, Sheriff. And you were Sheriff of Milwaukee, not far away, so you kind of get this. Just a culture of lawlessness. How does that, how do you solve that?
Well, first of all, the social order has collapsed in these west side and south side neighborhoods in Chicago. You have kids growing up without fathers. That's one of the pathologies. You have gravitation toward gangs, gravitation toward dangerous lifestyles like drugs, alcohol abuse, selling drugs, that sort of things, weapons violations, weapons possession when they're not supposed to have those weapons. By the way, they're underage, and many of them are felons, and you can't possess a firearm, but they don't care about the law. So you look at some of these things: dropping out of school, not staying in the workforce. Those are some of the pathologies that lead to this stuff. That's the cultural rot and the cultural dysfunction. So you ask, what do you do about the cultural rot and dysfunction? First of all, you can't have a political class that basically looks the other way on this. The city of Chicago has been in control by Democrats for 100 years, probably longer. Nothing but Democrats in the State House, nothing but Democrats in Congress, in Cook County and the city of Chicago. They will look the other way at this stuff. And, I talked about that, like you said in the article. They look the other way because, guess what? If people were to ask like you're asking, and like I point out, hey, what's going on, and who should be held accountable for this, the Democrats would have to point at themselves. So they look the other way. They don't want it talked about. The liberal media, by the way, the Chicago Tribune does a great job on this, whereas many newspapers, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, they don't talk about this either because it's a reflection of Democrat policy, failed urban liberal policy that contributes and creates the environment for this stuff to thrive.
We're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, trucking the truth across America. I'm with Sheriff David Clarke, former sheriff of Milwaukee. You can follow the sheriff. Go to americasheriff.com, and he's also on the board of advisors for webuildawall.org, and he's on every week talking about that. But today, I want to get off that for a second, not that it doesn't matter, and focus on this op-ed you did on townhall.com, which is up on my site this afternoon, on crime in Chicago. And I want to read, if I may, sir, one excerpt of your column that I've highlighted here. And may I just read it?
Sure, go ahead.
You said, most violence in the American ghetto involves blacks killing other blacks. This is complicated for liberals and Democrats. They can't blame this on whitey, systematic racism, the police, or the National Rifle Association. The cultural rot involved in this violence has the left tied in knots. Therefore, the inaction. That is about as powerful a paragraph as I've ever seen written on this. And I think you nailed it. So where do the Democrats go with this now? Like, what are they going to do?
They're not going to do anything because, like I said, John, this has been going on for the last 3, 4, 5 years. Record numbers of murders in the city of Chicago, record numbers of people shot. I mean, this thing, on weekends like that, they overwhelm the area hospitals. They don't even have hospitals nearby that they can get these people to. So they got to drive them further to get them to a hospital. And once you get shot, as serious as that is, if you don't get immediate medical attention, the likelihood that you're going to survive that's going to be real low. So you're right. The Democrats cannot blame anybody but themselves when it comes to this, because if they could attach one of those other things that I mentioned, they would do it in a heartbeat. But they can't do it here. And that's why I said, that the sort of thing, the sort of policing that needs to go on there to make those neighborhoods safe for the overwhelming majority of law-abiding people that live in those neighborhoods, good black people, hard-working, just trying to get through life, have to live like in a war zone in a major city in the United States. So, the Democrats are going to have to stop promoting these failed urban policies that they push on these cities. And I call it the ghetto because that's what it is. And that's another thing the Democrats don't like. They don't like it when I refer to it as a ghetto, but it is a ghetto. When you go down there, there's inadequate housing, nothing but gangs, abandoned cars on the streets, in yards. It's horrible. Nobody in the United States of America should have to live like that. But when you live in a city controlled by Democrats, and you go to any of these other cities, I mentioned Baltimore, you look at New York, these are controlled under the political control of the Democrats. So it's their baby. They have to do something about this. They don't want to do anything about it because it's one of their pet constituencies, the black vote, and they don't want to turn off black voters. So instead, they just put up with it. They tolerate it. They talk about it after it happens. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is horrible. Oh, this is unacceptable. But we don't get a plan of action with support for the fine men and women who wear the uniform of the Chicago Police Department, who could get this thing under control in no time flat if they had the resources and they had the political support, including from City Hall, from the State House, and from the federal government. But they're not getting it. You're not going to get it from a Democrat.
Sheriff Clarke, let's look at another part of your column here. It was very good, by the way. Folks, you got to read this. Go to townhall.com. It'll be up on my website this afternoon. Sheriff David Clarke, a column on the violence in Chicago. It's one of the best pieces you're ever going to read on it. You talk about Chicago mayor, the new mayor. I guess she's the...
lesbian, yeah.
Yeah, Lori Lightfoot, and Mayor Lightfoot. And she spoke out and called the violence unacceptable. And she announced that she is going to hold accountable Mondays to grill police commanders whose areas had increased crime over the weekend. And then in the column, Sheriff Clarke says, really? That's it? It's too late for the weekend. People are already dead. I read that. You don't want to laugh because it's sick. It's sad. But it's like, what the hell's that going to do? Okay, 8 people are dead. What happened? Instead of how are we going to prevent the 8 people from being shot in your precinct? what the hell are they talking about?
Yeah, that's why I titled it Clueless in Chicago. They don't have any idea. They need to get, first of all, I think they need a new police superintendent down there. Eddie Johnson's been down there for a number of years, and this has gone on under his watch. And like I said, he doesn't have a plan. But you want to be proactive. You want to aggressively go after this. And so that's what I thought when I was reading the news column on this, where she said she's going to have Accountable Monday. See, they just attach, labels and names and platitudes, and they think that that's a plan. And I thought, no, not Accountable Monday. How about Accountable Friday before the violence starts? This is predominantly weekend violence. Before the violence starts, and grill the police commanders about what they're going to do, what their plan is, what resources they're going to use to prevent the violence from happening. So see, they're in a reaction mode instead of a preventive mode. And because of it, the violence has already occurred, and then they're going to talk about it afterwards. I think it's a shame. Chicago's not that far from Milwaukee. It's about 82 miles, and I go there frequently. It's a great American city, like Baltimore, like Washington, D.C., but there's certain sections of that city, and I say this all the time, too. There's some great areas in Chicago, the Magnificent Mile. They got a world-class zoo down there, but the thing is, you'll never reach your potential as a city by leaving a large segment of your neighborhoods and communities behind, and that's what's happening there. So you can't gloss over it and say, well, hey, look, we got this beautiful downtown area. Hey, look, we got this beautiful area over here. But that doesn't matter when you wake up in the morning and you find out that in one weekend, 51 people are shot and 10 dead in your city. As a mayor, I'd be appalled at that. And like I said, this isn't a freak thing. This goes on all summer long. I'd be appalled. A hedge would people would be in big trouble. And the police commanders would be in big trouble because they're responsible for it. But you got to make sure they have the resources.
Right.
They refuse to hire people, more cops. They're trying to do this on overtime. They're wearing these cops out. Then again, the cops are not going to get aggressive until they know they have the political support.
Exactly. All right, I've got a caller that I want to merge with you that's got a question for you, Sheriff. I've only got about a minute and a half here. Mary in Richmond, you're on the air on the John Fredericks Show with Sheriff David Clarke. Go ahead, Mary.
Good morning. Good morning both to you and Sheriff Clarke. My question is, Chicago needs money. Why did they give that land to the Obamas? That land is worth millions of dollars. The Obamas have millions of dollars. She just got $8 million for advance for a book advance, and Obama went down to Venezuela and just made $400,000 for a speech. Why don't they buy that land instead of the city of Chicago giving it away?
Yeah, that's a political question. The people of Chicago don't want that park down there, that land that's being used for his library. They don't want it there. They're fighting it, but they're losing in court. So, that's a political battle.
I think the judge says that they could go. I think it was on the news yesterday that they can go ahead with the construction. But if they go ahead with the construction, then buy the land. Don't just give it to them. I mean, Obamas are from Chicago. You'd think they would be proud to buy that land.
Yeah, well, they're interlopers, really. He's not from Chicago originally, but that's where he landed. He saw a political opportunity there, and good for him. But he's not originally from Chicago. But, while Rome burns, these Democrats down there continue to fiddle.
All right, we're out of time. I want to thank
All right, thank
Mary,
you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
All right, Mary in Richmond. And Sheriff David Clarke, thanks for being with us. Get more information, America's Sheriff. His column is going to be up on the JF Report a little bit later on today. Meantime, you can get it at townhall.com. Sheriff David Clarke, thanks for being with us.